One creature leapt out of its room, pouncing on a guard who'd failed to see it coming. It looked like a growler, but with a huge brown mane all around its neck. Bullets bounced off it as easily as they had the door. Its enormous jaws tore the guard's head off, then turned to its next screaming victim. Axel produced a box from the desk drawer and chucked it down the hall at the creature. Its eyes flashed menace toward him, but then drifted to the box. It left the half-dead guard and prowled toward the box, sniffed it, and then burst into a deafening roar that vibrated the door and the walls around her.
Oh God, it's going to kill Axel!
Hello and welcome to the Bald Ambition Podcast. I am your very bald host, Mookie Spitz, and the ones with ambition today are Ingrid Moon, author of the new science fiction novel Biohunter, and Mr. Scott Allen, who is the voice on the newly released audiobook version of Ingrid's new novel. Welcome aboard, Ingrid and Scott.
Hello, hello.
Thanks for joining me. I had Ingrid on the pod about a week ago where we discussed publishing, self-publishing, the crazy world of content creators in 2025, trying to get noticed in this attention economy. And we discussed the relevance and importance of content repurposing. So you got a book and you want people to check it out. You could self-publish on various platforms. You could put out different versions, the paperback, the hardcover, the ebook, and a viable option and a smart one is the audiobook. And that's exactly what Ingrid has done with Biohunter. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself for listeners who weren't privy to our prior conversation? Tell us a little bit about yourself, Ingrid, your writing, the Biohunter idea, and bringing Scott on board.
Well, I'm Ingrid Moon, author of the Biohunter. I wrote this book last summer, actually, as part of it's not really a contest. It's kind of a challenge, I guess, where you're given a prompt and you write a story. But in this case, they give you a book cover with a title and a fake name. And then you anonymously write, a book, a novel, novella, whatever you want to write to it. And then at the end of it, you publish that under the pseudonym and see what kind of traction you get. And then in October, when it's all over, you can switch it to your own name, which is what I did. You can give them back their cover and just be done with that altogether, or you can buy the cover off of them and continue on with your story and publish it under your own name. So that's what I did. So in October, technically, this came out under my name. And so always, at that time, Scott, who was with us, it was narrating one of my other science fiction books. So we couldn't really get to this one for a while. And then I decided, you know what? This has so many different voices. It's not that Scott can't do like 172 different voices that you would never know were him, but it has a 14-year-old girl and kind of an older black man, and I really didn't want to have it like sound inauthentic. So I wanted to cast those parts. So we did that, and then we also did a few other voice actors for voices here and there, and then Scott did all the rest of it, which is fantastic because Scott's amazing. And so that just released. That took forever. It took a long time to really kind of make all of that work, all those moving parts. And we got it together and just released it Tuesday. It was last Tuesday, the 15th. Although it technically isn't distributed yet. It's still slowly making its way into the various platforms. It is on Spotify, though.
And we'll put links in the description, folks, for you to access Ingrid's website with all of her content, get the book itself, and get the audiobook.
There you go.
And I find it interesting, too, that basically it was a challenge. They gave you, if I heard it right, they gave you a cover, and then you had to kind of write a book to this uninflected image that was on the cover, which is a wonderful creative exercise. Biohunter evolved out of that. And then you, in a sense, retroactively got a new cover, claimed your own work, and got it to the point where you published not only the copy, but now the audiobook version too.
That's very close, but that is the actual cover that I was given.
Oh, I didn't
the
realize
only difference,
that.
Yeah,
Thanks
the only difference is the name.
That's even cooler.
Wow.
That's even cooler. I did not realize that. That's great.
Yeah. And I'm doing the same thing this summer. So I'm writing one. Actually, I just finished last night the first draft. So can't talk about it. Can't say what it's about or anything until you'll find out in October. But yeah, it's pretty nice one. It's a fantasy this time.
Yeah, I checked out the book and I really, really enjoyed it. In Hollywood terms, it seems like a Dances with Wolves in a sense of someone going native, flipping their allegiance after really having a relationship with someone who is ostensibly the enemy, or in this case, the hunted, and feeling that we're conflicted morally and we have these pressures. And I loved how you drew out that relationship between Axel the hunter and Mira the hunted without doing too much of a spoiler on that.
It's pretty obvious. It's in the blurb, so you know.
Okay, so I don't want to give
no spoiler there. Yeah.
I don't want to give away too much. So just to give folks context for the themes of the book. And it also reminded me of that short story, The Dangerous Game, that we all read as kids at some point, of a hunter who turns out to hunt humans. So if we're doing the movie of Biohunter, I would pitch it as Dances with Wolves meets The Dangerous Game, with some terrific dialogue, interpersonal relationships, conflict between the corporate state of this fractured world, post-apocalyptic world, heart winning over money and mind. That's my take on it. So I had a very enjoyable time reading the book, and I would love to give it a listen once that's out too.
Good, thank you. Yeah, you'll enjoy it because it's not your traditional narrated book because it has the voices in it as well. And let me tell you, the woman who voiced Mira, who's 14-year-old girl, she did a fantastic job, and she just did that entirely in a vacuum. Like, here's the script, and then she sends back files, and I was like, holy crap, she nailed it. So that was really fun. But yeah, it really helps to play up their relationship when you hear them talking to each other. Just it's different and it's fun.
Absolutely, that's the struggle I'm having. I'm reading my book section to section as little mini podcasts on my other podcast show, No Hair, All Heart. I've kind of usurped that pod with daily readings from my book. And the biggest trouble I'm having, I'm of course not a professional like Scott is, but I'm having a hard time with accents, genders.
If you have different people voicing characters, and in this case, we didn't meet together and do it together, so now it's like, are they having the proper inflection for the dialogue provided? Sometimes you get voice actors that are given dialogue and it comes together and you're like, yikes, this didn't work at all. And so you need them to be like at least on a Zoom call or something together to like do their dialogue and hear how each other are asking the questions. So this one actually turned out really well. They were both really good and professional at what they provided.
Yeah, so here's an example of the multiple voices.
Hey.
She called weakly from where she lay. He stood over her, wanting to tell her what a complete asshole move that had been.
Sorry, that was dumb,
she admitted.
This girl is unbelievable.
She reached a hand up toward him. He hesitated, then lifted her to her feet.
Get in the car.
She punched him square in the groin, then bounded off into the darkness on the thin, unsteady legs of a fawn.
Speaking of intent and tone, did you guys have a little creative brainstorming session prior to you laying down the tracks, like what Ingrid was intending with the book overall and particular scenes, talk about the mood, talk about the general setting, that kind of thing? Or did you just kind of wing it off your own interpretation of her work?
Well, actually, obviously, Ingrid, as the author of the book, she did work with Gabriel to have him go through the sessions, and correct me if I'm wrong at all, Ingrid, but like, so she could kind of feed him during his recording session, here's what's happening, here's your emotion, here's your mood. And I think that was really helpful for him to give us the dialogue to feed him properly. And then Melanie, who voiced Mira, was just miraculous. I told her, like, look, we're not meeting together. Give me 3 different versions of your dialogue. And 90% of the time, the first take she gave me was perfect and spot on, and then I had some options to choose from.
So you did the master mix, is that right?
Yeah, so I narrated the Biohunter. I did the master mix of everything together, and then Ingrid helped fine-tune things at the end because she loves that stuff too. I also voiced about 4 or 5 of the other characters or any extraneous characters that were there for, one shot. So
the one-liners.
Yeah.
Yeah, Captain Adams.
Yeah, Captain Adams and some of the executives from the
right. The evil corporation. So,
oh my God, Shelley! I am so in love with the voice you did for Shelley. Even though he shouldn't have had like a Southern accent, I don't care. It was like, I was like, this is not. Who did Scott hire to do this voice? Because this doesn't sound like him at all. This is so, new and unique. And anyway, I loved it so much.
That's awesome. That's my next question, Scott, for these secondary and tertiary characters. So you're the narrator of the whole novel, and then you've got the one doing Mira, right? It was her own actress doing that.
Right.
And when you did the voices of, let's say, Captain Adams and the Corporate Stooges, did you had distinct voices, it sounds like, for each?
Correct. Yeah. That is my preference and sort of my skill set for audiobooks is that I was trained as, grew up as, etc., as an actor for stage and screen. And while those things, didn't work out to make me super duper famous, I still have that in me that I want to create characters. And so reading through the book and then listening to the dialogue provided allows me to then go in and say, okay, now who would this be, or how might they sound, or what? Sometimes it's just a matter of tone, right? This particular book, everyone's kind of in this society where there's not really a bunch of people from other areas of the country, so you don't deal as much with heavy accents. A little bit is, going to be fine. So even figuring out like what kind of a tone, what kind of a vocal sort of staccato might a person have so that you recognize them when you hear the person speak.
I think that's terrific. Going back to my own train wreck of a reading, I think I've got a Japanese character. I've got a German one. I've got an American doing a fake Southern accent, so that in a sense is even harder to pull off. And I just kind of gave up. I've got the effervescent anti-hero who just comes across over the top.
Right.
And then I've got a slew of female characters where I just soften my tone a little bit. But but I'm sure listeners would appreciate a little bit more.
Yeah. That was probably the only, I have done a couple of books with Ingrid previously. And I did everything. I did the narration and all of the characters. And so when I'm doing the book that way and I do female characters, I always think like, well, I'm doing all the voices. So the sort of the overall tone of my voice, even though I change it, I don't know, it works for me. I felt a little awkward in this book doing a couple of female characters when she had an actual female or 2 females doing different roles. And I was like, oh, it feels a little weird now. But you know what? We listened to it and it all worked out. So I think it still plays out really well.
Let's play another clip real fast.
I'm tired of people telling me to calm down when you're planning to kill me.
Barnes rolled her eyes.
Nobody is planning to kill you, Mira.
Except him, said Adams, glaring at Mercer.
He really is good at this asshole role.
And speaking of process, Ingrid's book is in nicely digestible chunks. So each chapter is anywhere from, only a handful of pages to maybe max 10 or so. It depends on your format too. So that lends itself very well actually to an audio experience because people are doing this and that, right? You'll rarely have somebody sit and listen to continuous hours and hours from a book. You're going from here to there. You're on your train. You're cooking. and you're just listening in little bursts.
Yeah.
So did you record that way? Can you tell us a little bit about the process of translating a novel into an audiobook just mechanically? Like how did you
Yeah.
go about slicing and dicing all the text into these nuggets?
Well, I will say that based on my own experience from doing a number of audiobooks, the standard sort of thing is you never want to have an audio file anyway that's more than about 30 minutes maximum. So it's really helpful when any chapter of the book is less than that. That makes it easy, right? So if a chapter in audio as you're reading or narrating is only 15, 20 minutes, perfect. In rare cases where a chapter might take an hour to read or 45 minutes, as the narrator, my job is to make sure that I can provide the files that are well, prepared in a certain time length, that kind of thing. So then you would have to have the discussion about like, oh, do we split this chapter up somehow, or how do we present it in the audiobook? But actually, in my own experience with all the audiobooks I've read, I've really only come up across one audiobook where a chapter ended up being over the sort of 30-minute mark. So it makes it a little bit easier. And like you said, hers is really well encapsulated, that each chapter is so nice that they're, all under 30 minutes, I'll say that much, but, it might be 15 minutes, 12 minutes, 28 minutes, that kind of thing. So you can listen as you go, or, grab a bit of audio wherever you're at.
It helps to keep the pacing going. And the more page turning, like, if you have your little hook or cliffhanger at the end of every chapter, which, isn't always in every chapter. But once you start putting those in there, then people have to turn the page and start the next chapter. And then they're sort of obligated to read to the end of the chapter. If it's short, then you just hook them again and have them read it. So
Right.
I like short chapters for pacing and for action.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I'm the same way. So for my sci-fi book, I limited myself to about 8 pages max for chapters, and they varied from 4 pages to maybe 8. I think it maxes as 9 or 10 when I couldn't help myself. But I think that's optimal for reader and writer, especially in 2025, and it fits well to the audio format too, because people are inhaling chunks of content when we're inundated by content throughout the day. We check our phones hundreds of times. All the screens, all the craziness.
Well, you said that earlier in the beginning, right? That people are listening to more audiobooks. And even my friends, I have a couple of friends that are like, oh, I read like 40 books last month, or I read 12 books last month. I'm like, how do you read so fast? Like, I don't even read that fast. And what they're referring to is they listened to that many audiobooks. So I
don't think I can get through audiobooks that fast either.
People say like, I read 12 books last month. I'm like, you listened to 12 audiobooks. Got it. Yeah. So, but it's all about timing, right? If you're in your car, you have an hour commute or something, that's, 2 hours each way maybe, but otherwise people are grabbing as they go. So having those short, fun little chapters that keep everything going, it also brings you back. If chapters are too long, you're halfway through one and you have to stop and pause, sometimes that stops you from wanting to maybe come back to the book as often. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that's how people are consuming content. And overall, the endemic ADHD of our society precludes David Foster Wallace 900-page books with literally, he's got like 10-page paragraphs in that book. And I don't think that's going to fly. No one consumes content like that. So for mass consumption, it's a good idea. And I even obsessively limited my paragraphs to just 3 lines each. So like turning a book into a series of tweets to just capture the pulse of how people are absorbing content these days. And it's audio, it's in little nuggets.
Yeah.
And it's fun to repurpose. From a writer's point of view, Ingrid, is it weird for you to hear your prose being read aloud, not only by one person, but by several, and it becoming its own audio thing? How does that feel as a writer?
It's pretty awesome, actually, especially if you have someone talented like Scott reading it, because then, it's being brought to life in a way that it way back when we did our first book together, I basically just said, I don't know what's going on or how to do any of this. And I just handed it to Scott, and he brought back, like, he brought it to life so much that I was floored. And then I knew that from that point on, I could just trust Scott to be creative and give it his spin and do whatever. And when I hear it, I'm just blown away every time. And it's also very exciting to hear your own words brought to life. You're like, holy cow. And a lot of times I say, oh my God, did I write that? Wow.
I remember a few texts that Ingrid sent me saying, like, did I write this book or did you write this book? I think you wrote this book.
Because it's just, it comes back so amazing. And so it's really exciting to hear your own work. If it's done well, obviously. I don't know if, maybe there's some people out there with, I don't know, there's a lot of authors who read their own. And I've considered doing that for my robo-fiction book, which is nonfiction. Just kind of reading it because it's kind of like just telling you a little bit of information, but it wouldn't be the same. Like, it's not with a narrative tale, you want it to have that living, breathing, feeling alive world that you spent so much time world building on. So it's great.
And also, I think as a writer, having somebody else read your stuff and, in a sense, impersonate your characters, however fictional they were to start with, it gives it a different spin many times in ways that you never even anticipated. So to your exact example, all of a sudden one of your characters had a tinge of a Southern accent. And you had never even thought of that when you're writing the dialogue and the character speaking. That never even entered your mind. And then hearing this character speak back to you with that twang, you were like, wow, that's a new dimension to a character in my book that I, as the author, didn't even think of.
Yeah, exactly. So Scott has part of the creative process is he gets to sort of add a little bit of that life to these characters that on the page in just words, like anybody could put whatever they want in their own imagination, right? When you read somebody else's dialogue, you're like, oh, I have to insert my own whatever here. And so then when, you have someone talented who can just infuse their own ideas of that in there and it works, it's fabulous.
And Scott, how did you in a sense stumble into this gig of doing readings, voiceovers for audio? You mentioned you've done many other books before. You mentioned you've got a background in acting. Was it a natural transition for you to start doing audiobooks? Did someone lead you to the well? What happened? What's your backstory in terms of doing what you do?
It's funny. I tell my wife all the time, I'm like, why didn't I think of this years and years ago? It's such a natural thing for me because I've always been sort of this storyteller around friends or family or, in other situations, writing dialogue even sometimes. And as an actor, I was trying to originally get into film or theater. And like I said, when I was younger, I did a number of things and I was happy with all of that, but it never took off to the extent I wanted. Some of that was my own anxieties that I'm fully aware of. But when you're behind the microphone, all that anxiety goes away. And that's what I discovered is that for anything, a couple of video games or anime series or things like that, or any kind of, audio things, you don't have that same sort of fear or anxiety of visually or physically, what you may look like, etc. So audiobooks, because I grew up on, Saturday morning cartoons and mimicking all the voices of all my favorites. And when I got into audiobooks, I realized this was a great place for me to take all of these characters inside my head and, sort of set them free as it pertained to the actual books. Give them an actual voice, make them an actual character. I don't know about you, but I've listened to a few audiobooks where the narrator is very clear, has a lovely voice, but does zero in the effort of making characters sound different. So you're literally just reading somebody, you're listening to somebody read a book to you. And I always feel like I'm being robbed a little bit. Like, oh, that could have been so good if this character did this thing or that guy was, slightly different, even though the story may have been great. So my goal is to not go overboard, but to give as possible natural sounding characters that are truly different people. And the minute you hear their voice in the book, oh, that's so-and-so speaking. That's so-and-so, right?
Now, I listened to The Mercy of Gods, which is the newest book from James S.A. Corey. And it was narrated by, some SAG actor who did a wonderful job. And it was very, he did a wonderful job. But there was very little variation to the voices, so little that, in fact, half the time I didn't know who was speaking. And I was like, oh, is that character or that character? And so it's a little disconcerting to not be able, because I don't have any dialogue tags or any way to distinguish, like, this is one person's line and this is the next person's line and this is their response without dialogue tags or attributions.
Right.
And so, to have that distinction a little bit, even just a little bit, just raise your pitch a little bit, lower your pitch a little bit. You don't have to do full accents and be a full actor, but just kind of shape it enough that, people can tell the difference. But of course, if you have the talent to make everybody unique, then by all means.
Yeah, that's been my struggle too, reading my own book, where I know that if I take it over the top, it's going to be ridiculous, like faking a German dominatrix scientist's accent. I could be like, "Was ist los?" But I'm going to sound like Dr. Strangelove here. That's gonna work.
It's walking the fine line of, I don't want it to be Monty Python.
Exactly. Exactly.
Like, I love those overboard characters, but not so much in an audiobook.
Yeah, you gotta be good at it. And the more overboard the character is, the more adroit you need to be as a voiceover artist to be able to pull it off without people busting out laughing for all the wrong reasons. So you end up with kind of a generic reading. I listened to an audiobook of Thomas Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow, which is this behemoth of a book, 850 plus pages in print. And it was read by someone who's actually a Bloomberg journalist. I was listening to a Bloomberg News podcast, and I'm like, it's the Gravity's Rainbow guy. So he obviously moonlights as an audiobook reader. And he had kind of an old guy, husky horse voice, which was more or less fitting for the narrative. And he did an excellent job considering the depth and breadth of this encyclopedic novel. But again, to you guys' point, when it came to the characters, they weren't really differentiated, and otherwise colorful personalities didn't get a chance to shine because, this guy wasn't an actor. And as it proves to be, he's a Bloomberg journalist, and he did a great job with the narrative, but when it comes to the characters, not so much.
Yeah, it's just an extra little boost to an audiobook that, when provided, really makes you understand how much more you enjoy it. I just forgot the gentleman's name who narrates the Harry Potter series, Jim something. But anyway, I apologize, Jim. But he's great at that. He has these just little nuances that let you know who exactly is speaking without really changing his voice very much. Less characterization than I do, but still very clear and concise as to what you're listening to. So there are people out there. There's another series that I'm in love with because I'm a sci-fi nut, the Helldivers series. And the first time I listened to it, I didn't really care for R.C. Bray. I was like, who's this guy? What's he sound like this for? And then after about 20 minutes, I was like, I love this guy. I wasn't used to sort of his gravelly tone, but it fit the book so well. And then again, his minor nuances and what he does as each character, man or woman or child, speaks is spot on, so that you know exactly who's talking throughout the book and the series. So, kudos to those guys.
It does help as well if the author is able to make the dialogue distinct enough that you can tell by what they say.
100%.
But that's a really hard thing, and I'm still learning that stuff. So.
Yeah. You don't want to have said John, said Sally at the end of every sentence because that loses the flow, right?
Right.
So definitely that makes a difference. But there are very few times in your books where I've had the issue. I think once maybe in a previous book, I had to say, whose line is this?
No, we did have that in Handler's Gambit when Rhea's like, it was, I'm trying to remember the chapter, but it was one bit part that I think you read it as either Rhea or as the captain.
You're right. I'm sorry. What was that? Was that The Handler's Gambit by Ingrid Moon, narrated by Scott Allen?
Exactly.
You should do movie previews too. Like do that.
We
Be
should.
that movie preview.
Yeah.
He did do he did do
A
we did
trailer.
a trailer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was hilarious. Yeah, I got to do a new one for all these books.
Yep.
Yeah. On a dark and stormy night.
Exactly. In
Yeah.
a world.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's shift the conversation for a second, especially while we still got you, Scott,
Mm-hmm.
to the marketing and business aspect of the audiobook universe. Ingrid and I were talking about, being self-published authors and going rogue and doing our thing to get attention and market. As an audiobook talent, as a reader, how do you get clients, and what is it like for you from this business angle?
That's a great question. I guess everyone's story will be a little bit different. I am fortunate enough that when I sort of got in, or I'll say when I started my journey on audiobooks about 7 years ago or so, I joined a few different communities or groups, online, etc. And just randomly from information I posted, from having some nice little sort of demos that I also created a website so people could go find me and listen to my voice and listen to a few different audiobook narratives for different types of, voices that they might like, etc. And I was found by a company who produces audiobooks and have used me fairly frequently over the past few years to be either a narrator or part of a multicast book where I might do 2, 3, 4 characters in a single book, but I'm not actually narrating the entire thing. So it's just about, making sure you have a way for people to get a hold of you. I have an agent as a voice actor for potentially, anime, video games, any of that kind of good stuff, or animated series, which I'd love to do too. I've had some success in that area, but not as much as audiobooks, but that I've really done on my own, right? I haven't had my agent throw me a bunch of audiobooks. I've made sure that I have the right tools for people to find me, to promote myself. And then, of course, just making sure that you are, professional in every aspect of the game, I guess. Just, helps to market you in the best way possible.
So I'm
And
guessing you have samples. Like Scott Allen reads from.
Yeah. I have a couple of different, starting out too, I had to just pick my 3 favorite books or 3 different genres of samples I might want to put up there and read a little bit of something just so they could hear a little bit of whatever. In fact, I'm a crazy John Carter of Mars fan. And so one of my first samples was just the beginning of that first book. In sort of a slightly Southern or Virginian accent, because that's when the book took place. That's the main character, right? So just giving a little, if you want a whole book in an accent, I could do that. I usually just use my voice as the narrator unless it calls for something different. But having those samples, having a little bit of here's an action sample, here's a slow sample, here's a multifaceted sample, for sure, is a necessity for people to see that what can you actually bring to the table.
Just to add to that, as an author, where you find audiobook narrators is on some of the audiobook platforms like ACX, Authors Republic, Findaway Voices, which is changing to In Audio at the end of the month. And some of those places, there's a lot of them out there. And it's not difficult to find them. They have contracts to set up for you and everything, so you don't have to worry about coming up with contracts and all that stuff. It makes it really easy for you to find them. I will say some of them maybe aren't the best for doing the overall process, but to find people, it certainly was helpful. That's where I found Melody.
Yeah, for sure. That's where I started my journey, really was on ACX. I think a lot of people that are interested in doing audiobooks will go there. And I also think that from a writer-publisher of your own book, that's the tricky part, right? Because you're going to have anybody and everybody that has a Bluetooth microphone and a computer potentially on there to be a narrator, as well as professionals. or more professional, whatever. So the key is, of course, making sure that you get enough auditions to make a choice that truly fits your book, right? That you can find somebody that does all of the things that are required to ensure your book is a success. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges, that someone like yourself, Ingrid, might have, is like, how do I find the right voice?
Right. That, and I just didn't understand the whole process in the beginning, and you walked me through it, which was very helpful, because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm clicking buttons, and I don't know what these things mean, and it was very confusing. Actually, I wonder if sometime I should put together a little, first-time audiobook producer, maybe you should watch this video.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
sure there's a million out there, though.
Any audiobook nightmare scenarios or disasters, just from the opposite blooper reel point of view, that might even be kind of terrible in the moment but funny to relate?
Well, I will tell you that one of the very first audiobooks I auditioned for, I kind of learned a big lesson, because when you go on any of these sites, they're like, here's the audition sides. Right. So they're giving you some specific pieces of the book, maybe within a couple of chapters. Maybe it's just like the first chapter to say, send us your audition. So I did this audition for this book that sounded interesting. Again, being a sci-fi fantasy, I don't even mind a little thriller, horror, that kind of stuff. I sent in this audition and the guy's like, oh, I love your voice. I'd love you to read it. I'm like, great. Okay, let's do this. And then he sent me the manuscript, and a few 3/4 of the way through, I'm like, it changed into this scenario of stuff going on that I was like, I'm so uncomfortable.
Wow.
I'm so uncomfortable with what just happened in this book. And the ultimate lesson was, I won't agree to, I'll do an audition if they're like, hey, we love your voice, we'd love you to do it. I'm like, great, my next step is you send me the book. You send me the whole manuscript and let me read through it and make sure that there's nothing that's going to catch me off guard. Because I did have to cancel my contract with that guy. I was like, when I do audiobooks, I'm like, it has to be something that I would invite all of my family and friends to listen to. That doesn't mean that they have to be into all the same things I am. And I'm not against cursing or profanity where it's called for, things like that in any book. But situations have to be things that I'm comfortable reading also. So,
yeah, that's a terrific best practice that you bring up.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, read it first before you leap in and literally put your voice behind the text.
Yeah.
Unless it's me, Scott doesn't get a choice.
Yeah. She's like, I have a book. Yeah, I have a book.
Porn,
here
you
it
get
is.
to read my porn. Here it is.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
And in terms of reading that book, how much prep goes into it? Now, when I read my book, I obviously wrote the thing, but what I'm discovering is I really need to read the section I'm going to read and kind of process it and wrap my head around what's going on, even though, again, I wrote it, I know what's going on. But, but you need to be in the moment. And I've gotten my tongue twisted and I've messed up. And, I have a system where I go, stop, check, check, check. And sometimes I'll, F-bomb myself and then, go back over the same passage. And I've also noticed that there have been a couple instances where I forgot to edit it out.
It can happen.
Yeah. So you're listening to Mookie Spitz read, from Johnny Fazuli, and all of a sudden you hear check, check, check.
Yeah.
Fuck. and then I go right back into it.
Yeah, right? The newbie stuff happens to everyone. I mean, years ago when I first started, I didn't really know how to do an audiobook. I'm like, I can just turn on a microphone, read a book, and let stuff happen as it goes. Well, there's two parts. One is, as far as prepping for the book, I always read the book at least one time through. I need to know from beginning to end is where in the book does something happen that changes how characters might be reacting to each other, right? Or a twist that you wouldn't know if you only read the first 5 chapters, right? Doesn't happen till the end of the book, so that you can be prepared for, I got it. It's all leading up to this place, and then continue on. And then when I'm ready to start, because I love my characters so much, I am a big fan of I color code all the dialogue for the primary characters, so that when I'm viewing it on the screen, I know who's going to speak next myself, and I can just flow. I'm fortunate enough that I could potentially pick up a book and recite the narration of an audiobook cold if I needed to, and, be 90% pretty good at it. And then, of course, there's those times when you're reading and you're like, oh, that sentence is completely wrong. I need to go back and I just have the total wrong emphasis or intonation or whatever the case may be, right? And that's where the second part comes in that you were just talking about, Mookie, is the whole, when I first started out, I would record, and as I was recording, if I made a mistake, I would just snap my fingers twice, right, to make a mark on the audio track to know I got to come back and edit that out. I did it, and then I would just redo the sentence and continue on. But the same thing happened to me where, once or twice I was like, oops, missed an edit, not so good. So I got away from that and discovered my new friend, Punch and Roll, which allows me to quickly back up, record right over what I just made a boo-boo and continue on, and very little editing time at the end when I'm done.
That's terrific. That's an awesome best practice. Would you mind sharing some of the technical details, at least in terms of the gear and software you use?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people, again, I have met people who are at any level of narration. There are people that are using, Bluetooth microphones and a laptop. Audacity is one of the software that a lot of people start out with in the beginning. And then you've got people that insist on that they need to use Pro Tools with their XLR and very, very specific microphones, whether they're using a shotgun mic or a diaphragm mic, etc. But I have dabbled in all things Adobe for so many years with Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator and one of my previous sort of businesses or careers, and then into a little bit of Premiere and After Effects just for fun. And so for me, it made sense that when I started to dabble in audio, Adobe Audition was right there in my sort of toolkit. And I love it. And personally, again, just a matter of opinion, I don't see a big difference between the final product, whether you use Pro Tools or Adobe Audition. I have professional voice actor friends who use, what's that, WavePad, I think, Ingrid, you said you
Yeah,
used
WavePad,
something?
that's right.
WavePad, right, for doing their stuff. So it's all about, are you comfortable with the tool? Does it provide you the options for doing the things you need to? In the best case scenario, in fact, I'm about to start a new audiobook in a week or so where all I have to do is record and send in my files. And that's like the godsend for any audiobook narrator. I don't have to edit. I don't have to master. I don't have to do anything. Just provide a really great file. So as long as you are comfortable with your tools, I do use Adobe Audition. I have a Apollo Twin interface. I use a nice XLR microphone. A TLM 103, I think it is. I have everything set up in a nice little booth in my home that I was able to create and just sort of have it, as quiet as possible. Nothing is ever soundproof.
It's a fancy little closet.
Yeah, where I can provide the best possible audio, and then it makes it much easier for anybody who needs to hopefully master anything I'm providing to do so.
Yeah, the tech has really come a long way. I remember in the early days of podcasting, you needed an investment of several $1,000s with the analog mic and then the soundproofing and the fancy software. And it's really gotten down to the point where you could really get away with just shouting into a smartphone, as I'm doing right now, and the audio quality is at least good enough.
Oh, for sure. I have friends or my agent for voiceover sometimes, they'll say hey, here's this audition. If you're traveling, it's fine to just use your smartphone. Where it used to be all these people had to go and find a place to take their microphone with them and go into a closet in a hotel room and pad it with comforters and things to make it, a professional booth. I'm like, the sound quality of smartphones these days is so good. You can, in fact, 2 of the auditions that I landed were done on my smartphone at my in-laws' house. I did go into a closet just for some quiet, but it was just on my iPhone, and I sent it in and booked a couple of, video game things. So,
yeah, I've done probably 120 podcasts in 6 months, and probably 115 of them are me yelling into my smartphone, and you could debate the quality of the actual content, but in terms of sound quality, it's hard to compare.
Yeah.
I would be hard pressed to know that's my procedure for the most part. So
yeah.
convenience reigns, booyah to digital technology.
Yeah, for sure.
And then that democratizes the entire art form, for better and for worse, right?
Yeah.
So Ingrid, what next? You're writing another book, and I'm assuming Scott is in your repertoire of most favorite audiobook readers. How are you going to promote the audiobook? Is it going to be a little bit different than your approach to the ebook and print? Is there anything special that you're going to do? I'm assuming you're going to share teaser clips of the characters talking and kind of blasting the internets with little nuggets of audio goodies. What's the approach from here on out?
I think that's a great idea, actually. My approach is probably the same as I would do for the ebooks, which is, you put it on social media, maybe some ads. I have a bunch of marketing networks that you can create what's called, my brain's not even saying the word right now, but it's a bunch of, you spend like 3 days blasting out a whole bunch of, they're not ads, they're kind of ads, I guess, but they go out in like people's newsletters who have like 100,000 people on their newsletter or whatever. And that's a marketing tool that we use a lot for ebooks. So in a short period of time, people get blasted with your content. Putting up some samples and things like that, I think is probably not a bad idea. For me, it's like choosing which ones I like. So for example, I sent you those 3, which, if you want to splice them in to this podcast, that'd be great, but you don't have to. But those are fun. And then I'm going to look for some other things that maybe are specific to audiobooks. I'll probably enter it into the contests that I usually enter it into for awards and stuff to see if, if other people like it. It's nice to get that validation. Right. So pretty much those things.
Well, it sounds exciting and fun, and you have another modality to market. Yeah. And I'm envisioning, just given the fun dialogue, even between the main characters, the relationship between the hunter and the huntee evolves in such a cool way that even snippets of dialogue along that trajectory, or even highlighting some of their exchange, could be really fun to listen to in like a 5, 10, 15-second clip as kind of a teaser. Could be a lot of fun.
Yep, sure is. I did put.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I did put a snippet in my newsletter a couple of, I think last month, that people could listen to. But of course, that was before it was available. So now I'll do a little more of that. Snippets.
And then you two, you're going to collaborate on the mystery book, or is that TBD?
Well, that one has a female protagonist. I tend to write. I usually have a male and a female, both, but lately, most of my books are with the male protagonist is the primary, and the other's the, what do you call it, deuteragonist or whatever. Scott will be doing the Tempest's Fury, which is the 3rd book in the Saxon saga with the Handler's Gambit, even though that primarily features my female main character. But, for consistency and because he's amazing, Scott will do that one. And then, I don't know, I'll have to think about the new one in October. Maybe I'll do it myself. Maybe I'll hire Melody again. Maybe I'll find somebody else. We'll see.
A lot of times that's what people kind of consider when hiring a voice actor, right? Like, who's the main protagonist in the book, etc. Though I will say that I have done a couple of books where the female was probably the lead or the protagonist, and it still turned out to be what I think was a really amazing story. So, it is a matter of what does the author feel the book needs? Because that's the key. You have to be happy with the people you choose, to do so. And whether it's, having a narrator in one voice and then those main characters in others, the multicast books that have been more recently, I think, coming out versus single narrator all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to bring up the AI challenge, because what is a conversation among creatives that doesn't address artificial intelligence. And here it's within the context of bots doing voices.
Yeah.
Now going back a few years, even on platforms like the blogging platform Medium, you could click the audio icon and then a voice would come and read your blog. And it sucked, but at least you were a click away from hearing it. It's clearly come a long way, and it's getting to the point where almost, like again, the Monty Python kind of almost, but not quite, maybe, sort of, sooner or later, yesterday, tomorrow, it'll be indistinguishable from a human reading. So what are your feelings? I mean, Ingrid, from the point of view of the large language models starting to write books, and Scott, from your point of view as a voiceover artist, what's your feeling about AI in general? Do you feel like your creative futures are at risk? And how would you, as kind of an ancillary answer to that, how do you differentiate that ghost in the machine, namely human beings with lived experiences bringing their heart, soul, and passion and talent to creating original content in the wake of the bots just taking over the world?
Yeah.
It's the Terminator happening.
Yeah, right. That's a really relevant question for today, for sure, because there are so many companies advertising all of their new, voice AI, this and that. And there's even the most well-known one, or the one I see all the time on ads, 11 Labs or whatever, where they now have options where you can have it whisper and stutter and, take a deep breath and things like that. For me, as far as the audiobook realm is concerned, I've heard there were some softwares out there even 2 years ago that were like, hey, write your book, feed it into our thing, and you'll have an audiobook. And I listened to a couple that were done by it, and I was like, there is zero emotion in those readings to date. And even with the 11 Labs one, as much as I think it's getting closer to being able to replicate human speech, I don't know that it's something you would want to do an entire audiobook, because the amount of script preparation required to do it would be probably more time consuming than just hiring an actual human to read your book and get it done. That's just my opinion. I was seeing some of the stuff they've done. Now, if they get it to the point where it can actually read your book and it knows how to, figure out emphasis and intonation and emotion and, meaning of sentences and all that together.
And differentiate voices.
Right. That'll be a thing. But I don't think we're there yet. I don't think it's going to infect the audiobook realm too much in the very near future, but I also can't say that I don't think it's not something that couldn't happen completely in the future, because that technology truly is evolving so quickly, and changes are, really quite amazing in a lot of the other areas like graphics and things like that.
A couple months ago, Amazon KDP, which is where independent authors post their stuff onto Amazon, the KDP now offers voice narration of your books, just like, here, try this. It's quote unquote in beta or whatever. But I'm like, I'm loath to even have that button on my KDP page. I need human beings to do this. This would never work for me. But it's glaring at you on every book that you publish, right above your little report section or your book section. It says, would you like to turn this into an audiobook? I'm like, no.
Right.
Yes, but no.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit better than the example I used on Medium from years ago.
Probably.
But it's getting there is the thing. And that segues to my next question, which is having a rapprochement, in a sense, like using the AIs as a buddy or a companion or a tool. So you're doing the creation yourself, and then you give yourself or your output a little booster shot. Now, I say that within the lens of AI already is a part of what we're doing. So at least, Scott, from your point of view, the audio filtering So, for example, eliminating background noise.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And these are AI capabilities. It's not just Fourier analysis and the cleaning of the audio file.
Yeah.
But these are AI tools that are now making you sound better.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, I'm even surprised. I do a lot of Zoom meetings or live meetings during the day with one of my several hustles, and the audio cancellation effects that are in some of the built-in softwares now, like, my lawn guys can be right outside my window mowing the lawn, and the people on the other side don't hear it. They still
Correct.
only hear my voice. The voice isolation option, which is 100% AI in my opinion, is truly impressive. Like, I don't pretend to know the technology that makes those things happen. And I do see that being released in more and more sort of softwares and tools that are available for anybody from, for creating their social media posting or things like that, that are pretty unique and pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I've even got that functionality. I'm using the Riverside app, which
Mm-hmm.
I chose because the sound quality is quite good. It has AI tools for enhancing it. To your point, eliminating background noise. I get separate tracks for each of us, which are also AI facilitated. So I'll have an Ingrid, Scott, and Mookie track.
Yeah.
I can independently adjust volume. And I can also mute. So, if we interrupt each other or if there's anything I need to edit, I literally get a transcript. And as I edit that transcript, it automatically splices the audio file.
Yeah.
And it does so in 3 dimensions across each of our respective voices.
Yeah.
So the technology is amazing. And
You just reminded me. There was I didn't mean to interrupt. There's another software that I use for work for creating sort of educational videos, and they just released this feature where as you're recording your audio, it's also transcribing it. So then rather than going back and editing out certain words by re-recording, you just go to the transcription and say, oh, I didn't mean to say the there, backspace out the audio's updated, right? You tell it, oh yeah, check for all the ums that I just did. So as I'm talking, right, it removes them all and you wouldn't even really know it. It's 95% good on any of those things that it does. I don't think AI will ever be 100%, but that's just me.
Yeah, and that's the app we're using right now also. And again, it's amazingly pragmatic and it's AI driven. So on the one hand, the bots will eventually terminate us, or at the very least make us redundant. And until that happens, they're going to start churning out so much content that they'll be eating their own shit in a sense, right? Because humans create the original content. The bots create content from our content. And then the bots are going to be eating bot-created content. So we're going to soon reach that point too. But I've just found them useful, and I tend to be slightly Pollyanna about all this. While I was writing my science fiction book, I did a lot of research. Ingrid and I were talking about science fiction that stays true to science.
Mm-hmm.
So I did my best with themes of mathematics, set theory, quantum mechanics, all sorts of goodies like that. And I wanted to be informed. So not from a writing point of view, I didn't instruct ChatGPT to put together scenes or write my book.
Right.
But from a research point of view, I think I expedited my writing process significantly and come across much more effectively as a hard science fiction writer than if I would have just been Googling around.
Yeah.
So I think it's got benefit there, and I'm just assuming again from a vantage point of clearing your voice and enhancing it in terms of just bringing out the real Scott. It's been helpful.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I do the same thing. I use ChatGPT myself, for some research, some looking up of items, anything I might want to be more familiar with to just understand. But it's not for me to then write it into something per se, unless it's like I'm doing my, day job work and I want an email to sound better. Yeah, I love those silly little tools. Make me sound more professional, but still happy and friendly. I can't think of the words right now. Click, done. Even then, you still have to edit. You still have to make sure it sounds like you. So
it's my favorite reverse thesaurus.
yeah, right.
You got a word on the tip of your tongue. You're like, I want a word that expresses this feeling in this context, right? And it'll just list a bunch of words for you. And like, oh, that's the one right there. Or sometimes it doesn't. And I'm like, oh, boop, it popped into my head anyway. So.
Even for locations. So a chunk of my book takes place at the fictional University of Hamilton, which was a thinly veiled disguise of Madison, right? UW Madison. And I used the LLMs to explore the campus, create an org chart of their current faculty, and really get to know that educational institution in a way that just Googling would have been really, really hard. So, so I think it's useful, and it's all to a degree. And we shouldn't just throw out the AI baby with the bathwater, even if that baby will eventually take our jobs. For now, I think we're all right.
But it will never take our creativity.
I'll say one more thing about the AI, because my brother and I talk about this all the time, and it always makes me laugh, because people are like, AI is going to take over, the robots, the Terminators are going to come and destroy us all. I'm like, here's the thing. When you make a robot, if it needs to do stuff with its arms, move box A from here to there, then don't give it legs. Just put it on a stand, and it just needs to move boxes. If it needs to lug heavy stuff across a warehouse floor, then make a pair of really strong robot legs with a table on top, that one can set the thing on it. So you don't need it to be a whole person. There's no scenario in my mind where I need an entire robot thing.
Especially a humanoid one.
Humanoid, they're in that situation. So it's funny to me how people think differently about what's coming,
Yeah, just don't give Skynet the nuclear code.
We need an Ed 2000.
Just don't do it.
Yep.
If we get an Ed 2000, then we can eliminate the police force.
I love Ed 2000.
Yeah, that movie is the best movie ever.
That's right.
One of the many.
You have 30 seconds to remove your hand.
I'd buy that for $1.
Awesome. So thanks, folks, for coming on. Thank you, Ingrid, for your terrific book, Biohunter. I really, really enjoyed it. The naturalness of the dialogue, the evolution of the story. The sparing simplicity of your style is very refreshing because it was action oriented, and it's built to be emotionally resonant and at the same time keep you excited in terms of the action. I think you struck a wonderful balance with that throughout the book. I look forward to listening to Scott's interpretation of this terrific content along with the other character specific voice actors.
Well, thank you.
There you go.
Thank you very much.
And then you can have us back for a thing where you're like, what were you thinking?
That's right. We'll do what they say in the business, a post-mortem. We'll do a post-mortem on that experience. And I would like to follow up too, just on how well the book is doing and what other best practices you have. And I'm an author. So I need to eventually put together the audiobook version of mine, which might be a little bit better than my daily readings and podcasting of my own content. and it's exciting. It's a crazy world right now with this tsunami of content that I just call the wall. And as a content creator, you gotta scratch at that wall and knock on it. And your goal is to climb it if you can, or at the very least try to break through it so to get some attention and sustain it. But the process is all that much more glorious where you're not only putting your lived experience into it, but you're collaborating and partnering with like-minded souls up against similar challenges, but also rejoicing in the creative process itself. And it sounds like you two just love what you do. And end of the day, regardless of your reach, how many books you sell, what have you. If you love what you do, then you're not working and you're really just celebrating the joy of being an artist. So thank you for connecting in that way. It's inspirational.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Shelley took a sip of the scalding coffee before he followed Drake into her dark office. She rounded on him with the vehemence of an assassin.
Don't do this to me, Thomas.
You fucked up, Zara. You gave in to your excitement and put us in an inferior position. He punctuated the next words. But right now is not the time to deal with it.